cutting edge guests, awesome, uncensored, jaw-dropping information, plus funny memes, good deeds, and loads of laughter. Kind of have it all. Ladies and gentlemen, if your soul's awake, then welcome, because you're in the right place. Well, hey, good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. Welcome to the Sovereign Soul podcast program. It's a show which stands for love, levity, and liberty, because after all, love is the most powerful force in the universe, and laughter is the best medicine, especially when we're covering serious topics in all matters ancient and current and quantum, right? I'm your host, Brad Wozni, Reiki master, have been a former Canadian infantry soldier, got a lot of other things I've done before as well. Here's the thing. We have an incredible show for you today. I'm kind of vacillating with calling this show How to Save Our World, because the guest that you're about to meet is literally in the trenches, fighting the legal battle on behalf of mankind around the world. And she has been there and done that in some of the darkest, most ungodly places ever. If you think about a Bangkok brothel and you are working hard to go up against Asian crime families and save little children from sex slavery, if you think that's difficult, she's been there, she's done that. And there's a lot more to be revealed as we move forward. Here's the thing. Some of what you learn right now, you could literally implement immediately to generate a powerful and positive impact in both your life, those of your loved ones, and the community around you. And my purpose in the Sovereign Soul Show with our bling'd Buddha firing red pills from his 9mm, our purpose is for sharing these truths, these loves, this love and laughter with you to help foster a greater world, a community of folks that are literally standing up, fighting back against evil as we continue to spawn forward in this golden age of humanity. So the first thank you I want to share right now is to the whistleblowers, the digital warriors, citizen soldiers, your healthcare heroes, the powerful parents, the divine masculine protectors, and divine feminine guardians. Thank you all for tuning in. Your efforts to fight for the sovereignty of all souls on this new earth has not been for naught. Keep it up. Like I said, as a former infantry soldier in Canada, trained as a peacekeeper, spent some summers hopping out of helicopters, fighting wildfires in the Ontario, the Yukon. I kind of had this calling to serve the greater good. You heard about my Reiki background. If you're new coming here, I work on horses for free with that energy because Reiki is love. It's prana, it's chi. And my younger sister in Ottawa is still being a service to the world too. So our family's lineage holds patriots who fled Europe during World War I, World War II because of the Nazi infiltration. And many of my family members on both my mother and father's side stood up, soldiered up, put on uniforms, and got onto tanks that landed at the beaches in Normandy at the age of 14, or flew B-17 Lancaster bombers for the 6 years of the air war that Canada was in it. Well, here we are doing our part today by sharing truth. And as JFK said, that the service of truth is the ultimate heroism. And I've got to tell you, as a sovereign soldier, SOULDIER, soldier, all of you can too. And simply by tuning in right now to this amazing human patriot and absolute angel, Leigh Dundas, who I have here and is sitting here going, when is he going to introduce me? So here's the thing that you need to know, what's extremely important about Leigh's background. Since 19, when she was an attorney working with representing Fortune 500 companies, she pivoted and she started to work in the human trafficking area as a general counsel for an NGO. And she has devoted significant time to a modern day Sodom and Gomorrah region comprised of 140 child brothels along the Thai-Malay border. This is pre-2020. She literally writes she was traveling in excess of 100 miles per hour to avoid roadside bombers in order to provide assistance to the children trapped there and embed a film crew to document the horrors of the child sex trade. And that was until Thailand's coup d'etat forced a retreat. Well, in 2020, when the pandemic was unleashed on humanity, Leigh took the lessons she learned fighting those Asian criminal syndicates that were hell-bent on destroying children. And to the streets of America, she turned. And that's where she joined with others to defeat an even greater threat, a second Holocaust designed to eradicate our very humanity and crush anyone who would speak against it. And to which Leigh resolutely believes, fiat justitia ruat caelum. Let justice be done, though the heavens may fall. She is a general counsel right now for America's Frontline Doctors. She's involved in some incredible lawsuits that are going right up into the demon's face at the Pentagon and the US government. And she joins us right now from her home in the OC in California. Leigh, thank you for all that you do in your service to humanity, for being one of those voices that speaks up and joining us on this humble little Sovereign Soul show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here. It's an honor to be back in Orange County. I've been in like the middle of the country where it's really hot and humid. So I literally got off a plane a couple hours ago and I'm like, oh, it's so wonderful to be home, except for the politics of my state, of course. Other than that, but yeah, honored to be here. Glad to be here. Can't wait to chat about freedom and liberty and all that stuff, because that's the important stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for that as well. And definitely tell us a little bit more about your background, because you come from a line of patriots. They have also served. Your husband has been a service member as well. And this is just for example, folks, another way that you can serve, like we said, sharing truth, right? Real facts, not made up narratives. So tell everybody who's tuning in, listening to this, whether it's Spotify, watching on YouTube, we'll censor some of our comments so it stays up there, and use code word as we move forward. Share with us your background and your upbringing to literally become a warrior for humanity.
Yeah, interesting question. And I don't know how many people sort of know the deep roots, so I'll give a little overview here. I think maybe second or third grade, and we had a little class project of, oh, go ahead and, get to know your family tree and go, make a little literally family tree, right? It was second grade, get out the crayons, like who's mom, who's dad, who's grandma and grandpa's on either side, and go up as far as you can. So on my dad's side, my dad's mother was June Henrietta Combs, and she was part of a group of folks who literally could trace their lineage all the way back to Patrick Henry, who of course one of our forefathers, and famously said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And it was so interesting. I remember, I'd be sick as a child. I'd be looking at the back of the Kleenex box, and they'd have like Benjamin Franklin or George Washington or Patrick Henry featured, and I knew what he'd said because I'd read the back of my Kleenex box when I was bored and sick, but I didn't know I was really related to him. So I remember thinking, oh, that's really cool, and like, wow, what an amazing thing. And I remember looking at that like in grade school and being like, where would you have to be in life to be in such a position that dying is preferable to living in an unfree state, right? And it was something that I sort of started toying with even way back in the day at like 8 or 9 or whatever it was. And then my mom's family, for her part, they were, on her dad's side, they were a bunch of Romanian Hungarian immigrants. Her grandfather's parents had left the Hungary Romanian empire area. They were fleeing communism in the early part of last century, like 19 teens, 1920s, somewhere in there. And they did not want to die at the hands of the Red Terror death squads that were just running around doing their people in. So most of them got out, but they left the eldest son behind in Hungary, and my grandfather's oldest brother, and they never heard from him again. I mean, the Berlin Wall ended up happening, and the Cold War and Nazi Germany. So a lot of the folks that they left behind, they were lucky to get out and come here and go through Ellis Island, and it was just very, very much a, we're grateful to be here. My grandfather would not speak Hungarian. He understood it. He could speak it. He never spoke a word of it. He refused to speak it because in his mind, it would be a betrayal of the greatest country on earth, the country that had taken them in.
Interesting.
And they felt such a bond and such an allegiance and such a duty of care to this country that had taken them in when they lifted their little light of liberty next to the Statue of Liberty and said, "Hey, we are your teeming masses. Please let us come in." I mean, they did it correctly. They immigrated here legally, but it was very much, even though I didn't sort of grow up during one of the wars, there was very much this sense of, you do your part and we're lucky to be here, and the people who came before you did their part, and how dare you even consider not standing up when and if your time comes, even though you're a little girl. And of course, I came from a long line of, my dad's side, my dad's dad, like your relatives that I just learned, fought in World War II. Right. He was literally standing on the deck of the USS West Virginia on December 7th. They bombed it out from under him. Wow. He came out of a part of the ship, and they'd run out of bullets, or they were otherwise inoperable, their guns and whatever. And they were given orders to pick up potatoes and throw them at the suicide bombers, because the planes were so low that if you had a good arm, you might actually hit a plane. Now, was a potato going to take out a suicide bomber? Probably not. But the goal was to keep the guys busy and engaged, fighting the enemy any way they could, even when they were out of all of the things that would be effective. So he literally swam through burning water to get to another ship, because there was just a big oil slick. People don't know this, but so many ships had gone down in such a short period of time with lots of fuel that the water in Pearl Harbor, parts of it was actually on fire. Yep. And so the guys who survived swam through burning oil that was in many cases actively flaming. And he was put in the hospital for burns for about a week, and then they sent him back out to the Pacific Amphitheater. He ended up bombed. Another ship was bombed out from under him a few miles out from Australia. Oh. And they swam through miles of great white shark territory. As soon as he gets back to Australia, they put him on a sub chaser. That thing gets bombed, and the guys end up, 3 or 4 of him and his buddies ended up with a half a bottle of Australian rum and no food and no water. And they spent, I think, 3 or 5 days or something on the open water, adrift with a half a bottle of rum, and they survived. And what finally got this guy, my grandfather, he came home, and what got him was lung cancer when he was 42 years old. But my father served in the U.S. Navy. My husband was in the U.S. Army. His dad was in the military. And there was such a sense from the way I was brought up and the people I knew were brought up that you don't ever let this country be sold out on your watch, because this country is the only effing thing you have. Yes. You may think you have a family. You may think you have freedom. You may think your job's important. You may think that your husband's important. You may think that your next drama in your personal life is important. But if you don't have freedom, you don't have jack. Mm-hmm. You don't have jack squat. So if you want to survive at a personal level, it is absolutely imperative that you protect society, the society you know and love, the free society that we're blessed to live in at a societal level, whatever that may entail. So that was sort of what I grew up with. And when I saw what we all started to see in March of 2020, I was like, oh, first of all, this ain't what it looks like. I work in communist countries. I can read the writing on this wall. Maybe other people are slow to wake up, but not me. And this is the kind of thing where if we don't beat this back, we ain't going to beat it at all. So right. I got instantly involved, and I've been screaming and fighting and everything else every second of every day since, like so many freedom fighters of us have. And it's an honor to be among people like you and everybody else who get it, and the listeners who get it and are doing their part to keep their part of this country, part of this world safe and free another day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely. And it's for our children moving forward. Yeah. Right. If they don't have that world to live in, then it's all for naught.
It's all for naught. It is all for naught. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you really start to understand that when you live and work in brothel towns like I did from 2013 on and off from 2013 until we couldn't travel anymore in March 2020. Right. But, it's one thing to go to work and, stamp your envelopes and type on your keyboard and fight big legal battles in state and federal court, which is what I did for Fortune 500 companies for years and years. I've almost been in practice 30 years now. I think I'm on year 28 or something. Yeah. But it's quite something else to walk into towns in the back end of nowhere that have one airplane a day land on their landing strip. And when you get off that plane, it does a U-turn at the end of the strip and it takes off back to Bangkok, and you're there. Mm-hmm. You are there for the next 23 and a half hours. And you get to the town that you're doing work in and you're like, wow, I'm sleeping in a brothel, because they don't have hotels. Right. And you see crazy things like very large rats chasing cats that are actually tinier than the rats down the alleyways. And you're like, wow, okay, Toto, I'm not in Kansas anymore. I'm not in OC, I'm not in Kansas, and I'm not even in a first world country.
Yeah.
And, these girls are living a life that very few of us could even envision. If one of your loved ones were brutally raped, your wife, your sister, your child, it would be a devastating occurrence. I mean, if we all closed our eyes and envisioned that happening to ourselves or our loved ones for even a second, you're like, oh my gosh, what an awful event that would be, what a life-changing event that would be. And these girls that are 5 years old, 7 years old, 13 years old are having that experience 10 times a night, every day. That's their existence. They're locked in a brothel and they're raped for profit. And the profit goes to the people selling them, and the pedophiles are the ones raping them. And they are truly and duly enslaved. And unless somebody is going to come to their rescue, they have no out. They're not going to self-rescue. They're not going to talk a drunk German tourist who's 20 years old and got a little off track during his gap year trip out of his cell phone to place a cry for help. She doesn't know what a cell phone is. Even if she could place a cry for help, her family in Laos, where she came from, doesn't own a cell phone. She doesn't speak the language of the country she's in. If she calls the cops, they're the ones trafficking her in the first place half the time in those countries. Like these people, and trust me when I tell you that you might talk a drunk German tourist who's 20 years old and feels bad after you do your sob story on him out of his cell phone and place a cry for help in Greece, where the company, the nonprofit that I first worked for, first started doing anti-sex slavery work in Europe. You're never going to talk the buyer at a Cambodian or a Thai or a Laotian brothel out of his cell phone, because that guy is a cat of a different color. That's a dentist from Chicago. That's an architect from Miami. That's, a CEO from Switzerland who spent 13 months planning to have his substitute dentist doctor take over his practice and zeroing in on the exact type of brothels that will give him exactly what he wants when he gets there. This is a hardened pedophile, and he's not looking to give you a dose of sympathy. He's looking to kill you or rape you until you may as well be dead. So this is what we're dealing with in these corners of the country. And I got to tell you, it's a rather frightening statement that A, I would rather go back there right now than do what I'm doing here. And B, that I say things like, yeah, it was good training for the fight we're in now, but it was.
Well, let's go to that first comment that you had. The latter is you'd rather be there than here doing what you're doing now. As I just glossed a little bit about why you are one of the world's great heroes, literally standing up for justice, right? And I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King, to talk about another hero, one of his greatest quotes is, "To ignore evil is to be an accomplice to it."
Yeah.
And there's three types of people in this world, that we've seen. There's those that deny it and they turn their heads. We've seen this in history, what happens to those people. There's those that acknowledge it and do nothing. And then there's those that acknowledge it and decide to stand up and do something, just even something small. Like, folks, if you're listening, you share this interview on social media, or you share it with other people to hear, to help waken up people and more people, like we saw in the convoys, right? Which Leigh is a co-founder of the Americans Freedom Convoy as well, that helps bring awareness to it. So back to what you mentioned, Leigh, why would you rather go back to the most unruly depths of demonic humanity and seeing what they're doing to these little girls in those third world countries than be in America right now doing what you're doing in America? And tell us what it is that you're doing, please.
That's a long question to answer. I'd like to go back because I had made a promise to a lot of the girls trapped there that I would go back, and I haven't been back. And that's sort of something that weighs on your heart and your mind when you're not doing what you said you would do, even if you have good reason to not be doing what you said you would do. Secondly, nobody is coming for these girls. Really, there's a lot of resources devoted worldwide to European brothel towns, to the American human trafficking problem. you don't have a whole bunch of American soccer mom lawyers taken off for the Thai-Malay border.
Right.
And it's truly a no man's land. I mean, they've got radicalized jihadi suicide bomber training camps over the river from where these brothels are, and they sound like just what they are. They're places where all the Mideast bombers that blow stuff up, the vests. I mean, that's the same group in set of groups, in South Asia that are training other radical jihadist types to do that. And they have their training camp right across the river from the brothel town that I work in Thailand, and they use the brothels as target practice, essentially, as fodder. And I don't know why. I don't know why I'm attracted to the worst of the worst or the most vulnerable, but I kind of feel like, wow, if I'm going to go do something, let's go do something.
Yep.
And it's not fair of me to, and I don't want to say I ignore the American trafficking problem. I sit on a congressional committee. I work with the human trafficking task forces here in SoCal, Orange County, the Long Beach one, the LA one. I'm very active on stateside as well.
Mm-hmm.
But if I am going to go out and physically get involved with the trafficking fight, my preference is you take me to the absolutely most dark corner of the world to do that, because I feel like that is the place that has the least light and where we can make the most difference, and where if we don't do it, nobody will do it. Nobody's going to get there if we don't get there. So that's sort of the calculus that goes into my aberrated equation, if you will, when I look at doing things. But the other piece of it is, aside from the fact that I love doing the work and I feel very at home in an Asian brothel, which is strange, and I don't really have any sort of logical reason for. I get off the plane and I feel like I'm where God meant me to be this lifetime. But I also have a child, and until such time as she's done being a child, she has quite clearly told me she does not want to be living in Thailand and going to an international school while I gallivant about the country saving small children. So I split my time, or I did split my time until March of 2020. The other half of what drives me to say I'd rather be there than here is it's an easier fight. And it's a less scary fight because my ass isn't in the sling when I'm over there. Not directly. Now, are you potentially going to blow up? Are they going to get you? 330 bombs a year go off in this brothel town. Are you going to be standing in the wrong brothel on the wrong street at the wrong time when these jihadi crazy people blow up something and remote detonate? You might be. But I am not actually trapped in a brothel when I'm there doing the work that I do. And here I'm forced to confront that which everybody hates to confront, which is our own mortality, and the fact that I truly believe the evil giants of this planet are coming for you and me and ours. And it's a scary proposition. And even among people who are fairly bomb-proof, and I like to think I'm literally pretty damn bomb-proof, on the Navy SEAL order of magnitude of running away from like a yapping chihuahua or a bomb's going off, and are you going to stay and duck and cover and do something about it? Like I'm pretty much at that end of the scale, I like to think. But it still makes even those people take a moment and go, they're coming for us. I mean, I'm not alone in saying this. I was one of the first to say it. I stood on my boat, my speedboat, which is a ski boat that we've owned for 20 years almost now. And I took my boat on its trailer hitch and I towed it to Sacramento, and I had my husband park it parallel in front of the west steps of the Capitol because we were having a rally, and because I didn't trust my governor, and I figured he would run a goon squad out there and he might arrest people and he might mow them down and it might turn into a Tiananmen Square. And I was right. He used horses and 700 riot-clad officers to run a riot line against mommies who were breastfeeding babies and holding signs that said, "Let us work," in, I don't know, late spring or summer of 2020. I was up there so many times I lost count. But his jurisdiction with the Capitol Police ended at the sidewalk, and we had done our homework and we had parked our boat on the Sacramento Police Department side of that little bright line, and Sac PD was either for what we were doing or minimally not against what we were doing. So we ended up safe on our boat, staring at what looked like UN soldiers by the time they came out in their riot gear, doing a heinous act. I mean, they were mowing down veterans and mommies who were doing nothing other than begging for a constitutional right that should have never been taken away to be restored. And And that was scary. And I remember standing on my boat and saying, I fear that we are on a bullet train to Auschwitz if we do not course correct. And everybody there, I mean, if you were at a rally in like April of 2020, you were really awake. On the scale of asleep to awake, you were pretty damn awake. And everybody there agreed with me, and everybody online was like, wow, that girl's smoking crack. But you know what? Naomi Wolf came out in her Substack last week or 10 days ago, and the whole thing was, I forget what the title was, but it had something to do with genocide. It said they're intentionally killing babies. Like, I regret to inform you, this is a genocide. I'm like, F yeah, it's a genocide. Absolutely. And you are a Clinton advisor, and you're a feminist, and you're a person who, you and I did not share a whole lot, other than we're, I guess, both nominally feminists, but not a lot shared politically, probably not a lot of love lost between us prior to right about now. But even she can see the writing on the wall. I mean, she had gone through, did you read that Substack? She'd gone through the Pfizer documents that had been released to date, or her team had, and Pfizer managed to lose track of the 250 people-ish or so that got pregnant when they weren't supposed to in the nanosecond of a human trial that they did with these products before they actually unleashed them on all of us as a bioweapon. And despite the fact that they lost track of all the 250 pregnant women that weren't supposed to be pregnant but accidentally did, they did manage to keep tabs on 36 babies, of which 28 died. Mm-hmm. How the hell can you call it anything but a genocide at this point, right?
Exactly.
Blue-green breast milk, breast milk, killing motility of sperm. These products are obviously accumulating in the ovaries of people who have X chromosomes. Well, hell's bells. If you don't outright kill them, you're preventing them from ever reproducing. Genius plan. People are looking at me and they're going, it doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, it makes effing perfect sense. If you're trying to kill us, you're looking at this from the perspective that your government is trying to do right by you. If you're looking at it from a communist government standpoint or a genocidal takeover standpoint, every single thing they're doing makes absolutely perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And it's frightening. And it makes me want to go back to doing brothel work because it's easier and less scary. And that should scare the bejesus and daylights out of anybody who's listening to this.
It certainly should. You know, I mean, there's faith over fear that we can talk about, because that is what's really key for driving people to move forward. You know, well, let's just dip back into your grandfather's story, right? Having a boat bombed out from underneath him in Pearl Harbor, having it done again when he's back on another Navy ship, and just continuing to move forward despite those virtually insurmountable obstacles. And then boat number 3 bombed out and then set adrift for several days on sea with people. And that resilience is something that you really compound when you get on a show and you start sharing that with people. And my first introduction to you was the department DMED. I have the link up here, and we'll go to that right now. If you don't mind, we'll jump into the fast forward this. When yourself and Thomas Renz were preparing this, when the report was published, Amy and I were looking at, because again, that everything was the no jabber, no job, right? And the current hospital system she is working on is flying that flag, the flag that we know that has been part of the Reich for multiple generations. That hospital system is flying that flag. And then we saw the report published by the Department of Defense, Pentagon, for those folks that are up in Canada or in Australia. And it shared the hundreds to thousands % increase of issues. And there's a certain lieutenant colonel who grounded all Army pilots, helicopter, F-16 fighter pilots, and Army Rangers, because of these issues that are coming up. I'm going to go and pull this up right now. And then we'll get into this particular one. This is yourself and Thomas Renz. I actually have him up on BitChute, but we'll jump into another one here about Senator Ron Johnson, where it has come to now in full circle. Because this, folks, is one of the major things that is going on that continues to be hidden from public view. We're not seeing it in mainstream media. You have to go to independent news outlets or truthers like this show to hear or see about this. And it's been going on for a year and a half since they rolled out these experimental serums that we know are bioweapons. Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you want to share with us what happened when you did that hearing on January 24th in the state capitol with Senator Johnson and yourself, and Thomas Renz, and it was Dr. Malone was also there too, if I recall from the video, and Dr. McCullough and a whole bunch of other names that people are aware of.
Everybody who was anybody was there. So I had gotten a call from some higher ups in the U.S. military. These were colonel level, lieutenant colonel level individuals, U.S. Army flight surgeons in many cases, and they were appalled. I mean, they are the guys who are in charge of doing the medical checks on all of our service members across the board. Army grunts, guys who are just routing in, all the way up to guys who are flying the Top Gun type machinery right across our skies. And for those guys who are flying, they're required to get checks. I believe it is every 6 months, and that's true as well for the commercial guys. The pilots that were flying my American Airlines flight into Orange County out of Dallas today. And the reason for that is fairly self-evident. You want the guy behind the joystick of a plane that's either a $1 billion plane and going to be used in war, or carrying 400 innocent Americans. You want that guy to be fighting fit. You don't want him stroking out or having a hallucination while he's got 400 lives in the palm of his hand and he's however many thousand feet up in the air. And so the doctors have to sign off on these guys' health every 6 months. And what these Army docs were seeing is that subjectively, initially, they were seeing people who are not fit, right? They're seeing U.S. Army Rangers come in their door and say, I can't get up a flight of stairs. And they're like, what do you mean? You were able to, run a triathlon a month ago. Well, I got the shot, and now I can't get upstairs without passing out or, falling down or whatever. And it was concerning at an anecdotal subjective level. And they were also seeing a lot of cognitive impairment among the flight crew, cardiac issues, obviously, cognitive impairment, guys who are reaching up and turning off the rotor blades in a military chopper and the thing's falling out of the air and, they're walking away from the crash, but everybody on the base is like, what the hell did you just do? Like,
why did you just turn it off mid-flight?
Right, you're up in the air. The only thing keeping you up in the air are the freaking rotor blades, and you just turn those off. What were you thinking? And the guy's like, "Yeah, I don't know." I mean, talk about some brain fog, right? So Teresa Long was one of the outspoken ones, and she had testified earlier with Senator Johnson at the U.S. Congress in D.C., and she said this is not okay. And when I went into my higher ups, I said, look, we have only lost 12 service members worldwide to COVID. We've lost literally a dozen people to COVID. That's it. It's not that fatal. Explain to me why we're making all of them get an experimental medical thing that killed every ferret in the animal trial and for which we didn't even do any real human trials. And we have no data. Why are we doing this? This is antithetical to everything the U.S. military stands for. These are our best and our brightest. They signed up to sacrifice their lives, if need be, in war, but not to be a freaking lab rat. And the response she was getting from her higher-ups was, damn right, Colonel, and you're going to go freaking do your job, put those needles in those arms, and get me that data, i.e., we are using our military as lab rats. And she was horrified, as anybody with a heart and a brain, Wizard of Oz time. How many of these component parts do we have? As anybody with a brain who can see the devastation and a heart who would care about the devastation would be. And the military just didn't give a damn. And that's, of course, what whistleblower statutes and whistleblower protections are for those who aren't lawyers. The law essentially protects people in industries who see something that is morally wrong or illegal or unlawful or unconscionable or unethical going on, and they say, well, if you sound the alarm and go be the tattletale essentially and tell the world about it, you're not going to be at risk of losing your job because your employer decides to retaliate to shut you up by firing you. And it provides some protection against that eventuality. So the way it works, though, in this instance, is you really need to get that testimony on congressional record or before congressional people, congressmen and women. So I had been approached. I was scared to death that this data was as bad as it was. She had gone, a lot of the doctors who had started to see this had gotten their hands around some of the statistics that were in the DMED database. It's a database that logs every medical ailment that a U.S. military member might have. So if you go in with a sore throat, Joe Blow, your name goes in there, along with the fact that you had a medical exam on June 21st, 2022, and they gave you a diagnosis code of strep throat or Achilles tendonitis. Maybe that's because you can't run, or whatever the diagnosis is. And they'd gone into this database, and what they had seen was a drastic increase in every disease or ailment you could have, with the exception, I think, of rare hemorrhagic fevers. Everything else was through the roof. Cancers were through the roof, birth defects, infertility, illness of all types, autoimmune, rash. I mean, just anything, really. Everything was through the roof. So she was alarmed. They were alarmed. I was alarmed. We didn't want to have this data disappear. We didn't want to have this data not be known. We didn't want to have this swept under the carpet. We didn't want ramifications with their careers. So I called Tom Renz and I said, hey, do you have Ron Johnson's phone number? And he said, yes, I do. So we got in touch with Ron Johnson, who was putting together, as luck would have it, that coming Monday, the COVID-19 roundtable with all the doctors, McCullough, Malone, Corey, all the guys, all the frontline guys.
Amazing.
And he understood immediately, to his credit, what we were dealing with and the need to get the evidence out on the record timely and quickly. And he invited us to DC. We all showed up in DC. Tom and I did, and blew the whistle on their behalf on January, I think it was 24th of this year. And that really made a record. And Senator Johnson has done everything that could be asked of a senator and then some. He issued a letter, I believe the same day, to the U.S. military and the brass and said, don't you even think of destroying the data that's in that database. And they were already starting to monkey with it. I got news for you. The myocarditis numbers were going up. And as soon as they realized, because Teresa Colonel Long had testified earlier, a couple months earlier, on just the myocarditis piece of it, suddenly when you go into the database, the myocarditis cases were half of what they had been, prior to blowing the whistle. And it's like, wow, this is an accumulative database, which is to say it's only going to grow in size, right? You start counting with the very first case and you just add cases of strep throat or myocarditis or whatever.
Taking the white out to the numbers on the back end.
Yeah, suddenly we're rolling the odometer backward, which doesn't happen magically. It only happens when somebody rolls it backward, right? So at least, maybe it can roll back magically, but I've yet to see that in almost 30 years of law practice. Usually when the data rolls backwards, somebody's making it roll backward. So Senator Johnson put the U.S. military on notice. He's like, don't even think of losing the data or hiding it. But our military is up to some tricks, I'm sure, and they're trying to, I'm sure, scrub the data. But too little, too late. There's a track record of what it was, and the numbers were frightening. If your viewers don't know, just frightening. We went from 37,000 cases of anxiety in the years prior to the introduction of the vaccine to almost 1 million cases of anxiety.
Here it is. This is a quote up on the screen for those that are auditorily, they're not able to watch this, Leigh, if they're listening on Spotify or Pandora, for example. This is some of your quotes repurposed in this on blacklistednews.com, because again, mainstream, not going to happen, right? Because they're all in the pockets. They're all deep state, dark actor, Nazi puppets. Said, you told the Epoch Times in January of 2021, they introduced the Jabber Do. They mandated it for the U.S. military members. And in just the first 10 months of that year, anxiety across U.S. military members jumped from 37,000 to 931,791 cases. So that's a 2,400+% increase. We've got ranging from 500 to 9. I'm just going to rhyme off a few of these numbers. Jump in where you feel free. Breast cancer. Yeah, breast cancer. 500 to 900 cases in the 5 years prior to the introduction of the mandatory bioweapon. First 10 months of 2021, 4,068. There were nearly more in 10 months of 2021 since they introduced that mandatory thing to take than there was in the 5 years prior, according to the DMED. Female infertility, 2,200 cases a year, jumped to 10,713 in those 10 months. What else are we going to look at? There were some other incredible, like everything is up. It's by the hundreds to the 1,000%. Miscarriages in the military were at 1,500 a year in the first 3 quarters 2020. It increased to over 4,000 in the first 10 months of 2021. And we've got myocarditis, neurological conditions, and then deaths. Just a massive sweep of deaths. All of these sudden adult death syndrome, or what are they calling that right now?
SADS, right? Yeah.
SADS, yeah. What a bunch of bullpucky, right?
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah, I mean, total incidence of disease, you got to understand, across our military members, for every single year on an annual 12-month basis, January to December every year, you get about 1.7 million cases of everything combined. All the stuff we just read about, from anxiety to, anxiety to breast cancer, miscarriage, whatever it was, sore throat. Yeah, 1.7 million on average. And it stayed very constant. I mean, it was just a very level graph. And in the first 10 months after introducing the mandatory, it literally jumped from 1.7 million to 21.5 million. It was a 20 million increase in the first 3 quarters of 2021. I'm not Einstein. Math, not my strong suit. You don't need it to be your strong suit. When the graph goes from perfectly level, including in the pandemic year, nothing jumped in the pandemic year at all. The pandemic didn't change any of these numbers, which is kind of interesting. Nothing changed. And all of a sudden, you introduce the cure for the pandemic and everything looks like a spaceship taking off for the moon. Come on, right? And then, we had the Indiana Life Insurance Company come out months ago, right, with all of their data saying 40%. Right, yeah. Huge increase in the number of deaths in the people who aren't supposed to die, the 18 to 54-year-old category. And then last week, Liberty, I think it's Liberty National, it's named after Abraham Lincoln, right? Lincoln National, named after Abraham Lincoln, 5th largest life insurance company in the world. And they said they're up 163% on group policy death payouts. Group policies, again, are those that come through your employer because you're what? You're employed, which means you're what? You're working age. You're not really likely to die because you were just born or you're 98 years old and going to die soon. These are the people who aren't supposed to die. The insurance companies are going to be losing their shirts soon if they're not already. And I do believe that that's going to be one of the things that starts to unravel the whole 9 yards. I just think it's really going to start to get the data out to the masses in an incontrovertible way.
Well, on that point in data, I shared a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, actually, here on a podcast, that there was a Zoom recording that was published through Reiner Fuellmike's organization, who leading the Nuremberg 2.0 charge. And he had a CEO of a major reinsurance company, right? So for those who aren't aware of it, Willis Carone Group North America is a major reinsurance company that when the buildings collapsed in their footprint on 9/11 in September, the insurance companies have policies to insure against them for paying out. And there are 3 reinsurance companies in the world. Across the board, as the CEO of the reinsurance company, he declared on that testimony 2 weeks ago that mortality rates for policyholders are up 5,000% over the last year. Mortality rates for American policyholders for this company. So that should be alarming. And there are people that are still in denial. I have cousins in the same state you're in, a little bit northern, that are head ICU nurses. And they still today, up until a month ago, I was just sharing, like, please watch, please watch. They were very much waving the flag. I said, please take care of this. And got the text back, like, remove us from this bullshit, because they're believing that they still need to put people on vents. And that was in May of 2022. So there's this plague that people are completely brainwashed and taken over. We've seen some of the AI and the graphene that's in it. And the fact that you're taking this right up to the US government, you're also working on part with America's frontline doctors, which we didn't realize that until we learned about the DMED reports coming out in the Pentagon that we leveraged in Amy's case against the hospital. We were actually following America's frontline doctors and Dr. Simone Gold, the founder. We didn't realize you were the chief legal counsel at the time. So all this amazing dotted line stuff, literally 12 months, almost the day when we started having to look into that and looking at alternative ways of potentially employment for her to move forward in a healthcare system that is all about healing people and providing them things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, which act as monoclonal antibodies against things like snake venom, we've heard, and has some interesting stuff. So I'm going on a little rant here because this is a war that is being waged on us. Everybody, nobody's safe. Nobody's safe. Even if you're on the other side, you're not safe, because we've seen them that they're just casting them out, once their usage in time is up.
Well, and I mean, the point you raised a second ago about folks who are having to work in the hospital systems or be treated in the hospital systems, I mean, it's just fairly obvious to those of us who are in the know or aware, we're really having to rebuild so many of these structures from the ground up, because they're not the structures that we grew up with in the 1970s and 80s. I mean, it used to be if you were hurt and you were in America, you could reliably go to an American healthcare, anything, an urgent care, a doctor, in private practice, a hospital, and get pretty darn good healthcare, or at least what was thought to be pretty darn good healthcare. And even if it wasn't the best healthcare, it was consistently not going to kill you healthcare. It wasn't, you weren't going in a third world country to some guy who had a rusty knife and was like, oh, I'm going to take your bad limb off, or with no anything to anesthetize you. And now they're the new ovens of Auschwitz. I mean, I used to say at the beginning of this, before I got calls from police chiefs who had the hospital in town murder their wife with remdesivir against direct orders, against direct power of attorneys that said, do not do these actions, and they did them anyway. And then labeled the family, who was kicking up their heels, obviously, and with good cause, labeled them a direct threat and kicked them out, and then finished killing them off in quiet, without anybody to object. I've had FBI agents that I've heard tell, same thing happened. And I went from saying at the beginning of this, like, don't go to a hospital. Well, I mean, I guess if you're in a car accident, your arm is laying over here and your body's over there, fine, go have them sew your arm back on. I'm telling you right now, and this isn't medical or legal advice for the rest of our listeners, this is just Leigh Dundas about my family. I could lose my arm in a threshing machine accident in a cornfield in Nebraska right frickin' now, and I would take that arm to the nearest vet and say, sew me up.
Yes. We actually have it on our driver's license that do not go to the hospital. We have had this for nearly a year, thanks to Peggy Hall in your neck of the woods. And we've even got it on the kids' driver's license, and the little 13-year-old doesn't have one, but there's a piece of paper that says, if you go to the hospital, we're to be contacted immediately. There is no remdesivir protocol, none of this, and do everything to stay out of there. And like you said, go to a vet.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is the vets are going to be able to do any sort of traumatic anything in a life-saving way that an MD can. And they're not right now constrained by the system that all of the various laws that were put in place during the pandemic, or orders that were put in place, have constrained the hospitals. I mean, right now, if you don't do the Fauci kill protocol, your hospital loses all of its CARES Act money. And if you do it, you're completely immune from any sort of legal flashback. So nothing we as attorneys threaten to do holds any fear over the hospital. Like, yeah, well, we're immune, we're bulletproof, who cares? And so you can't get them for anything they do wrong. And if they don't stay on the Fauci path, they can be forced to disgorge all of their CARES Act money. And if they do the Fauci kill protocol, as you probably know and your listeners know, depending on the region they're in the hospital, that can be an extra almost $500,000 a person if they vent them, if they diagnose them with COVID, and if when they finally kill them, that's what goes on the death certificate. And that's a lot of money for hospitals, many of which who've been hand to mouth for years and not exactly rolling in the dough. And so every single person that walks in that door, if they manage to get you vented and get you remdesivir and get you diagnosed and then get you dead, you've got a $500,000 little label there on your forehead.
Exactly.
So
lottery ticket.
Oh, it's a lottery ticket. It's a cha-ching, cha-ching. It's a one-armed bandit that keeps paying out every single time you pull that handle. So unless you've got like Mother Teresa in the driver's seat as your doctor, who is willing and able to tell her entire board of directors at that hospital and the corporate chain that owns the hospital, you can take a long walk off a short pier and can actually stay the course. And while she's got 15 other patients to attend to, where the nurse might sneak in and countermand her order anyway, your odds are better off at your vet's office. That's just me, and I could be wrong, but I don't think I am.
I echo that. I echo that point. There's a lot of friends of mine, the very few actually friends of mine, excuse me. There's new friends who have created this whole tribe of all of us finding each other. But prior to friends and family, very few have stayed away and remained purebloods. And those that had that option for coercion, which I've had a few, have been forced out of the Canadian military. And we're talking about we joined together. One of my buddies, I don't want to say his name because of things going on right now. But man, and his wife was an anesthesiologist at a hospital and she was forced out, again, by saying, I'm just not complying. This is also happening across the world. As an international human rights attorney, you've seen it. We've seen it in Canada. It's continuing to happen in Canada. It's probably, if not in North America for certain, it's the most communist state. We just saw that Castro's half-son, a guy by the name of Justin Trudeau, that is pushed himself into a place with the same Dominion voting systems that we see that are used in the 2000 Mules Dinesh D'Souza documentary in the United States, and continues to claim power as the crime minister in Ottawa, has decriminalized fentanyl and cocaine and methamphetamine, crystal meth, so that and also is starting a sweeping legislation nationwide that anybody that has those, just like we saw with marijuana when it went legalized through the states in the United States, those that had marijuana charges, you smoked a spliff at 19 years old in university, and that's on your record, it was expunged. This is happening there, taking the guns away in 4 days, right? And then also the rollout of the CDC, which is not a US government organization, as many people may be having a challenge coming to learn this right now. It is a for-profit business like the Federal Reserve that you have and the world has, and they make their money off patents, and they have just put a rubber stamp on rolling out these bioweapons to children from 6 months and beyond. Now, if you are here listening to Leigh, you are watching her, and you have felt any of this energy of the data she's presented, at the very least, for US Army Rangers who were doing a triathlon a month before but can't even take a step up the stairs, what's going to happen with your 6-month-old child when they come knocking? We have seen over the last 2 years, they went door to door in California, Washington State, Quebec City right now, still, it's almost July 1st and July 4th, folks, going door to door that are knocking to check who in the house has their most updated V-card status, digital ID, and who doesn't. And they're making note of that. The health department with backup from the local law enforcement. We have seen this play out before. It's World War II. It's nuts. Germany. It's going on. And everybody has to stop and stand up. Now, I have a question that had come to me through a few family, not blood family, but family that are in the kind of soul tribe like mine of you and I in Canada. Like, okay, Canada, it takes Canadians, Australians a long time to like, we got this. All right, finally stand up, right? We saw that in the Convoy. You helped lead it in America. But America has a lot more guns than Canadians do, right? There's somewhere of just hunters alone, I heard, between 3 states, there's 28 million hunters. Why has the American militia not been activated to get involved when we have full-on evidence to remove somebody who is in your White House, who is allowing a genocide against his own population to take place? Why are those wheels of justice not turning that way? And why is the American militia not standing up if the military is not going to stand up? Those are questions that came through me. I'd like to put forward to you for comment as much as you can, because I think
they're good questions, one and all. I think that we talk about our Canadian brothers and sisters to the north being slow to sort of finally get in the game, but once they're there, and we pride ourselves on getting in the game quicker down here in America. And that's true when we're following our leaders. Mm-hmm. I don't know of a time in recent history when Americans have had to really run that calculation in their own mind and start to think about creating action separate and apart from the government and the military saying, we're going to war. We got bombed in Pearl Harbor and now it's time, everybody do your part. And, all the men go to war and all the women go to the munitions factories and everybody doesn't eat bread and throws your scrap metal in a pile so we can make more, whatever. We aren't used to we're very far away from our roots. I mean, that's hundreds of years ago for us now, that not a lot of people, I think it's been said, numbers I've heard were like 1.5% to maybe 3%, but closer to 1.5% of the people here in the colonies are actually the ones who stood up and told England to go to hell. When push came to shove, we're like, oh, everybody who came to America was fighting with England to, break away and do our own thing. No, 1% of the people who were here were telling England to take a hike and going across the Delaware River in the middle of winter and, hanging out with George Washington and doing the hard work. And that's telling. And even that group and that time period was a long time ago. And the fact of the matter is, people our age, Brad, I mean, we've not seen sustained conflict in my lifetime. The last sustained conflict that America had was the Vietnam War. And I was born into the tail end of that. I don't really remember that. Most of the people in my era don't. Even when we had parents who were in the military, we don't. We were just too young. And then, I mean, yeah, we had, 1990 in Baghdad. And that was like a flash in a pan. I remember I was on a date with my boyfriend at the time in Malibu, and we turned on the radio driving back. This was pre-cell phone, and it was like, oh, wow, bombs are falling in, the Mideast. And 4 days later, we were done. It was not Vietnam. It was not World War II. It was not World War I. And there's been operations here and there since then, Iraqi freedom, whatever. But again, they were very surgical and cut and dried. They were not prolonged. They did not, activate the draft. And America is just used to sort of, I think, resting on its laurels and assuming that the freedom that our forefathers fought for is a right and it's something that we take for granted. And I think the last 2 years has really been a wake-up call for the average American to go, oh, I actually have to do something to keep these freedoms here. Like I have to do something, not my husband or my grandfather who already did something. Like I might be asked to actually have to do something, or
lift a finger.
Living in a FEMA camp, or having the military round me up and herd me into, a World War II, Japanese internment camp or something like it. And I think that there's a slowness to act. People have to sort of turn that idea over in their head, and then they have to get comfortable with it, and then they need to move to decide to actually take action. And that's a process. But once you go through that process, then you get to the point of decisive action. If your viewers aren't familiar with it, I encourage them to read up on a concept. It's a psychological concept known as normality bias. And it's the bias that basically exists in all of us as human beings. It says, today is going to be just like yesterday. I'm going to get up and I'm going to take my preschool kid down to school, and then I'm going to drive down PCH and I'm going to get my iced chai tea latte, and then I'm going to go get my nails done because it's Tuesday morning, and if it's Wednesday I go to my yoga class, whatever, or I go to work, and none of us are really prepared to be driving down PCH and see a giraffe in front of our car because it's California, it's not Africa. And if we see a giraffe walking across the road in the middle of Orange County, our brain, the normality bias is put into effect. And step one of that is outright denial. This freaking can't be happening. I cannot possibly be seeing a whatever foot high giraffe standing in front of my Audi. It's not happening. I'm not in South Africa at the Branson retreat. Like what? And so that's stage one, denial. Stage two is deliberation. Q&A. Your brain's like, well, damn, that looks like the giraffe we saw at the Wild Animal Park 2 years ago when we took the kids, and it's tall enough to be a giraffe. And oh, look, it's starting to eat the eucalyptus tree on the side of the road. And then your brain's like, no, it can't be a giraffe. And you're going back and forth. And the third step is decisive action. Holy heck, that's a giraffe. Nobody else is here. He's going to get mowed down by some speeding car if I don't do something. I need to call 911, or I need to park my car crosswise and block traffic, or I need to flag down a policeman on the other side of the street. You can drill normality bias. What they've seen when they deconstruct after the fact when they armchair quarterback mass disasters, people who drove off the bridge accidentally and ended up in the swamp in Florida, and they didn't get out of their car before their car got flooded and sank to the bottom of the swamp, when they were in the tsunami that hit in Thailand and there's a supermodel hanging off a palm tree. Who are the survivors? Who are not the survivors? What they've realized is the difference turns on how long it takes you as an individual human being to get through and past stage 1 and stage 2, because those will kill you.
Yes.
Denying that there's a tsunami coming for you will kill you. Denying that, you know, you got a lion jumping through the back seat of your car ready to eat you will kill you. Q&Aing about it, question and answer. Is it really that? Yeah, I'll kill you. Decisive action will save your ass every single time, or get pretty darn close. And so your job, what I've been telling people and screaming at them from the stage, is your job is to drill this. You can practice this. You can inculcate this in your body, in your mind, in your being. And the way you do that, because your brain doesn't know the difference between a dry run or a practice run or a drill and reality. And when push comes to shove and it's the real thing, you will do it the way you drilled it. That is why you never want to practice self-defense by pulling your punch, because then if a rapist attacks you, you're going to hit at half hit. And you don't want to be hitting at half hit. You want to be hauling off and wailing on the bad guy, right? So you always fight full force, unless you want to have a bad outcome if the shit hits the fan. And the same is true with this. Drill your kids when you're sitting in traffic. Hey, babe, what would happen if a giraffe walked in front of the car right now? And your 4-year-old or your 4th grader is going to go, Mom, that's silly. That would never happen. Okay, great. But what if it did? I don't know. I guess we could call 911. That's a great idea. That would probably work. What if the cell phone were dead? What next? I don't know. We could, you don't care what they say.
Yeah.
All you care is that they're not getting stuck for very long in paralysis analysis. They're having any plan of action. Any action is better than inaction, right? So we've got to be aware of this. We've got to be aware of our own biases toward being overly obedient. If you're not familiar with the Stanley Milgram research, go Google it. 2 out of 3 Americans are so damn obedient as of the 1960s that they will kill their neighbor if a guy in a white lab coat tells them to. Yes. That's what the Stanley Milgram experiment showed. And you need to not be that obedient. Your child needs to not be obedient. You would be better off raising an asshole for a kid right now in the place we're living in than raising a good little, law-abiding, bow your head in church, never question authority, straight A student who never had her name on the board, which was me. I was quite the rule follower in society, but I had a hellacious home life in many cases. And so I liked to be rewarded in society for being a good child, but I had also seen what happened when an abusive bully got away with bloody murder. And I learned that they don't self-correct. They don't correct until you make them self-correct. Right. And it doesn't get any easier to fight that fight the longer you wait to get in the fight. So the people, ironically, who are stepping out right now are former military, former people who were in wars, former trained operatives, right? SEALs, law enforcement, former immigrants, people who immigrated from a communist country and already were tortured or saw the writing on the wall, and that's why they came here, and child abuse or spouse abuse victims. Because we have a heightened ability to perceive danger, and our default setting in terms of the normality bias is there is no normal. Anything can frickin' happen. You better have a plan, and you better be prepared to execute it no matter how wild and woolly that day may be. And those are the people who are out in front. And I regret to tell you, yeah, you already paid your dues. Yeah, you shouldn't have to be doing this. Yeah, you have 5 Purple Hearts from fighting in World War II and you're 98 years old. Yeah, you had the shit kicked out of you as a kid. Yeah, you were raped 10 times as a teenager by your mean ex-boyfriend's uncle. Get over it. You're here for a reason. God put you here because you have better skills than the soccer mom who never has done so much as break a nail this lifetime. You're going to be able to see the danger. You're going to be able to sense the danger. And your job is to sound that alarm and get people activated in your community. And it's wrong and it's unfair. And you're going to die if you don't take that burden on once again.
Well, bravo. I mean, full on clap if we had a studio here to give an encore to that. I absolutely agree. And while people are looking at things, can they go kinetic? I don't believe we don't have to do that right now. I mean, from Reiki and from everything else we're seeing on the planet and the uplift and the vibration and love, you can actually use the vibration of love. One of the Navy SEALs we know, Michael Jaco, used, act in the law loving vibration. As a result of that, And winning the hearts and minds doesn't mean you have to go kinetic first to pull those people out of Parliament Hill, Australia, wherever it is in Europe, even in the current White House for all of the stuff that's happening. It can actually be done by community communication and I'd say
And
it's
peaceful resistance.
and peaceful resistance. Exactly.
Look
I
at
mean,
look at
Gandhi,
Martin Luther King.
but
You
yeah,
know,
look at him and
this,
look at Gandhi, right? A small body. What's his Gandhi's quote? A small body of determined spirits fired by an unquenchable faith can change the outcome of their country, and in
right.
this case, of the world. And I believe that one of the viruses that can go is this one. Here's the first meme. Tell me what you think about this.
Okay, hold on. Let me get close.
We can expand it. I think it's
No,
doing
no,
a
I'm on my cell
yeah.
phone. I do my Zooms on my cell
Oh,
phone.
are you? Oh,
That
okay,
is,
no problem.
yeah. So
With
and
Elmo?
I'm blind as a bat. That is a good one. You know, I mean, yeah, the real virus has nothing to do with COVID-19. Let's be real.
Right.
And if you're not completely a room temp IQ or below, you should know that by now. Right?
Yeah. I mean, right here, this is the virus Operation Mockingbird. Good real news versus the media, and you got Elmo just pushing his face in a Pacino style in a pound of cocaine, right, and going for it.
Yeah, and people need to recognize. I mean, our government does not have a good track record. Operation Mockingbird really happened. That's what the 1976, 1978 congressional investigations were about. Were all of these CIA programs: Mockingbird, Paperclip, MK Ultra, MK Naomi, where they were controlling the narrative. In the case of the Mockingbird, CIA operatives were put into journalistic outfits to have everything parrot what they wanted to say in America. And now you can still, I mean, you've got Channel 5 anchors in Detroit saying the same thing as they are in Dallas, saying the same thing as they are in Malibu and freaking New York. That's not accidental. They're reading from a script if they're saying the exact same sentences at the exact same time that night.
And on different networks, ABC.
And on different networks
NBC,
even.
Yeah. Completely different competing networks, CBS. And now in Canada, they're all owned. They're owned. It's all state owned. You can't accept a single dollar unless it's owned. And Castro's half son was up there just 2 years ago, gloating at the fact that, hey, you're all here because I paid you to be here. Ha ha ha. Are we having a good time? This is
he's a virus. Talk about a virus. That man. Oof.
Yeah. Probably on his third or fourth clone right now, I think, or whoever's playing him. Yeah. Right. This is the new virus, though. The good one, the way we're fighting back, like you are helping lead the charge with your colleagues too, Leigh. And it says governments worldwide are struggling to contain a new virus that would have a huge impact on billions of lives. This virus is called truth.
The truth, baby. Yeah.
Yep.
And the truth eventually outs, and the truth gets out there. They're going to have a hard time. I mean, the fact of the matter is the inoculation works exactly the way they wanted it to. Yes. And it does the damage that they wanted it to do. And
that's the frog in the pot. Take the first one, maybe there's not much of an issue. Then they get the second one, and that shows the compliance. And it's from the playbook. People are like, Brad, you might sound smart. Leigh, she is extremely smart, obviously. But this playbook was published in the 1900s. They've attempted it on 24 different countries around the 24 different times in history in the last 120 years. And they just keep refining that playbook like a Super Bowl
it's a Betty Crocker recipe. And this is this is really their best refinement yet, because they managed to get all of the middle America and our counterparts around the world to beg for it, right? I mean, the Holocaust was very ham-fisted, right? You had to shove unwilling people into chimneys and burn them alive, and you had to really divide the country, because Germans and Jews used to be friends and cohabitate peacefully next to each other and engage in friendly conversation and commerce, and you had to brainwash them, and you had to get these Germans to basically nuke their Jewish neighbors, and there was the white smoke coming out of the chimney, and there were all these cattle cars, and all these dying bodies that this is just so much more elegant, right?
It is.
Get everybody to beg for it. Needle in the arm. The side effects happen later. You can't really necessarily show cause and effect so easily, but these people are dying, and the families are waking up. They're like, Grandma was just fine before she got her second Pfizer shot.
Right.
And a lot of our friends in the media now, and I'm talking mainstream and the alternative ones that are coming to the fore now, when I talk to them, I'm like, so what's your deal? Because you're giving me a microphone. Yeah. And I'm not going to say the narrative.
Not going to follow theirs, yeah.
And they're like, well, pharma killed my so-and-so after the blank, jabberwoo. And you're like, oh, okay. And these people are not going to ever unlearn or unknow that so-and-so went in and got a shot and a day later they stroked out or they died or they had a heart attack. These are people who are going to be woken up and never, ever again going to be deluded. And those are the folks that are joining our ranks, and they're loud and they're pissed. And when you look at societal movements, you only need about 3% of the folks to be the tipping point. I always thought it was 51%, but I've talked to all these like MIT grads now, and they're like, no. When 3% of the women and society think that women should have the vote, that's when they got the vote. When 3% of people agreed that the blacks should have the vote and be integrated, that's when that happened. And so we look to these structures in answer to one of your earlier questions, like when is, the judicial branch, when are the courts going to protect us? When are the remaining legislatures going to protect us? And they are all downstream of people just saying no. Right. We don't need to riot in the streets. Mm-hmm. I mean, could we? Sure, it's been done. That's called war or riots or coup d'etats, whatever you want to call it. But is that efficient? Mm-hmm. Not as efficient as what MLK and Gandhi did. All they did is they sat down and they said no.
No, they will.
And when enough people sit down and go, no, we're not doing the X. We're not going to close down. We're not going to listen to mainstream media anymore. We're not going to do this other thing. You bankrupt these structures, and they realize they need to check what they're doing and get back in the right lane if they want to continue to exist or not. But in either case, you've broken the back of the evil that was causing the bad outcome to occur.
Well, and speaking of evil, I have the quote up here from Henry Kissinger, and we're talking about united on compliance. And we talk about we, the people, have the power when you finally stand up and make your voice heard. And you can even do it silently, as you mentioned, with Gandhi and MLK. And this is from Henry Kissinger in a speech to the World Health Organization Council on Eugenics, February 25, 2009. For those of you who may not have learned, younger generations, what eugenics means reducing the world's population. We've seen this Agenda 2030, they've published it. It's all online. You can go back to 2003 and find all this data. They want to reduce the world's population by 90% by 2030, so 8 years from now. But obviously they've been cranking up the factory to accelerate that. So Henry Kissinger says, addressing the crowd there, once the herd accepts mandatory forcible vaccination, it's game over. They will accept anything, forcible blood or organ donation, for the greater good. We can genetically modify children and sterilize them for the greater good. Control sheep minds and you control the herd. Vaccine makers stand to make billions, and many of you in this room today are investors. It's a big win-win. We thin out the herd, and the herd pays us for providing their extermination services. And then it jokes, now what's for lunch? Going to have to leave on that note right at the end, because I want to show this. If you have a comment, I'd love to hear it on that one for sure. So one last funny meme.
They've gone out of their way to show their hand.
Right.
The question that remains is, why are we not listening to the words coming out of their mouth and the actions which back them up? And that goes back to the fact that we are a little bit hardwired to be obedient. Mm-hmm. We're hardwired to assimilate and not accommodate information that doesn't fit with our mental map. Mm-hmm. So if I've got a mental map that says I have circles and squares, and I get a star shape that I need to fit into one of my little pre-categorized, outlets here, mm-hmm. People are much better at shaving the edges off the star and calling it a circle and shoehorning it into that, mm-hmm. than they are at going, this is a unique thing I've never seen before. I have circles, triangles, and stars in my universe, circles, triangles, and squares in my universe. I don't have this star thing. I need to make a new category for stars. If you make a new category in your mind for the new star-shaped thing, that's called accommodation. Mm-hmm. We're hardwired to shove it into a pre-existing hole. That's assimilation and not to accommodate. When you start educating yourself on where are weaknesses are as a human being, where our tendencies lie, you're able to drill yourself out of those things and overcome them. I am not very obedient now. I am not the one who waits quietly in the crowd while a 3-year-old runs around crying for mommy. I am the first one to stand up and go, hey, little boy, are you looking for your mom? Let's take your hand and walk you to the office. But that was a process of being drilled by my environment when I was a child that was not optimal. Most Americans have had a pretty optimal environment, and we need to start drilling ourselves as if we do not, because we're rapidly changing, and America isn't seeing the change. But Kissinger telegraphed it loud and clear. And if we're going to win, and I do believe we will win, why do I think that? Because you and I are having a podcast today, which is proof that good won in Rwanda, in Cambodia, in the Holocaust, in all of our earlier battles. We're here because good eventually wins. But we need to get in the game. And we need to not undermine the amazing amount of effect that a single person can have, especially when that single person acts in concerted, united effort toward a common goal with other like-minded people. So back to, you quoted, I think it was Gandhi, Margaret Mead said something very similar. It was, never doubt that a small group of concerned citizens, I think thoughtful, committed citizens, concerned citizens, something like that, can change the world, because indeed they are the only ones who ever have.
Right.
And all we need to recognize is we are the they. We're the ones. We're the heroes we've been waiting for. Like, I'd never made a TV commercial before a couple of years ago, but now I have. Not because I was trained to. I went to law school. I didn't go to film school at USC. I went to law school. But we can do anything we set our minds to. Really, there is no cap. Everything in your life was somebody's bright idea, from the checkbook in your purse to the cup that you buy at Target to pour your water into to the lamp sitting on your desk. That was somebody's bright idea who simply ran with the ball and persisted until he brought it into manifestation and being here on this planet. There is no reason on God's green earth that you can't do the same. God put you here to actually do something new, to actually step out of your comfort zone, to actually be the change you want to see, to actually be the hero. And honestly, as scary and overwhelming as this whole thing is, I'm kind of grateful. I think there's a lot of heroes out there. I think I'm one. I know I've met tons of others, and we would have lived, what an inglorious, boring life if this hadn't happened and we hadn't been tested and we hadn't started discovering all of our heretofore hidden talents and skills that we didn't even know we had, and where we've actually activated them and made a difference. The mommies in Orange County, led by me, but nonetheless kept passports out of Orange County and largely out of a lot of other places. Our kids are safer for that. They're not living in the equivalent of Warsaw Ghetto. Don't ever doubt that you can do something. You can absolutely do something, because we are the only ones who ever have.
Well, my closing quote, thank you for that. My closing quote for you is actually going to be JFK, and your besties with, Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So
yes,
nephew to him. And my closing quote for you is going to be that he said that one person can make a difference and everybody should try. And Tecumseh said a single twig breaks, but a bundle is strong, right? And that goes right to those analogies. And in the reincarnation of souls that we've had in our lifetimes have brought us back here. We remember, you signed up, folks, for a contract. You may not have actually signed it in your three-dimensional world, right? But you agreed to be here for this time and to understand what part you're going to play. For any of you that have friends and family that are in that, well, I see a star, or I see a giraffe, and I'm not sure what to do. I have circles and squares, and I don't know what to do with the star. I recommend this. This is called The Kid by the Side of the Road, written by a amazing man named Juan O'Savin, current name. And you go ahead, you can find that. We'll put a link up to the book here. So that just starts opening the eyes to another aspect of history and how we got to this event that's taken place to finally get rid worldwide, and for good worldwide, the demonic dark forces, and unite with us in love and levity. And the creed and the ethos that you have just shared with us, I think, is something that we need to, when all this is over, Leigh, there's going to be, like, we have war cenotaphs. You're going to be one of those folks. You've got a Joan of Arc, literally, embodying her spirit and the spirit of many other souls that have been around this world, and that you're sharing forth, and as a divine feminine, as a lion mama who's out there literally saving people's lives leading up to this, and helping co-lead a charge. I am absolutely honored and privileged to have known you, even if our time ever ends and it's just this is one of the defining moments of my life, to have actually shared this time with you right here, right now. Literally, thank you for everything that you do. And I promise there'd be one more meme. We had 3, so here we go. And now that you're on the phone, I'm sure you're gonna have to lean in to see this one, but tell us what you think about this one. By a flirty girl 2000. I'm giving credit where credit's due. Funny memes.
I love that. And it's absolutely accurate. As a lawyer, I could not put this man, I couldn't get him to testify as a witness. I really don't think I could. He's that incompetent. He wouldn't pass the test in a court of law, and yet he's the leader of the free world, ostensibly. But I saw another one. I don't know if you saw it floating around the internet over the last 24 hours. And it said, well, if this doesn't just encapsulate his whole leadership style, and it showed the bike accident.
Oh, yeah. Just falling off that.
Yeah, it's like, this says it all right here. Like, as goes the bike, so goes the nation right now. And we got to do something about it. But I think we're starting to do something about it. San Francisco recalled its district attorney, who was a longtime Marxist. His parents were members of the Weather Underground. Mm-hmm. We've recalled 3 out of our 5 school board members. Their drag queens were recalling their overly liberal board members. And yesterday, I'm sure you saw this, Texas came out and said, with a resolution out of the legislature, I believe, or some like a law. I don't know what it was. I just saw it in passing when I was on a layover.
To leave the United States of America, Texas.
No, I didn't see that. I saw that they said that. Oh, wow. Yeah. The one I saw that just said they did not believe that the person who is in office was correctly
you're right. Yeah, that was elected. Yesterday. Yeah. So that and this morning. So yeah, the state of Texas is going to lead a charge to get the person that's currently in the fake White House at the fake newsroom out of office, because it was a legally rigged election. State of Texas is saying this, folks. So, and then they want to secede from the Union, from the United States of America.
Well, I think, this is just my 2 cents.
Great way to wake up people.
There you go. I'm spitballing it here, but it was Texas, I think, who filed right after 2020. Their AG did, and they wanted to have it heard in the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, and instantly they had half the other states jump on board. So what we saw, it was really interesting. I was traveling at the time. I was watching these states jump on board over a period of a couple of days, and I thought
the election results in 2020.
Exactly.
Just to clarify, we're speaking about.
Sorry. Thank you for giving a context. I was getting ahead of myself. But what we rapidly saw evolving was almost a new Mason-Dixon line. Mm-hmm. Where it wasn't a question of slave states versus, free states anymore. It was like this modern day Mason-Dixon line that was breaking almost the same way. And it was the states who still gave a damn about the country and the election and thought that there were improprieties in it and wanted to have that adjudicated versus, the ones that I live in, right, that are like, no, everything's absolutely fine, 2,000 mules notwithstanding, right? Yes. And if that, and that was early days, right? That was embryonic, right? That was like a month after the election. I think it was like December of 2020. And if that was the temperature then, and now we've got Texas finally moving on it, my sense, especially having spoken to some of these AG's offices and some of these governors and some of the muckety mucks in the various states over the last year, I think that there's going to be a similar sentiment now. And we may well find ourselves back in an 1860s sort of situation if we don't figure out a better way to skin the cat. And I think there are better ways to skin the cat. And I think our founding fathers gave us the tools to do that. Basically, the U.S. Supreme Court needs to grow a pair. And but they only do that. People have to realize they keep waiting for the judicial branch to act or the executive branch. All of those institutions are cowardly to some degree. They shouldn't be, but they are, particularly the judicial branch. And they will act once they have seen that the will of the people is going in a certain direction. They are downstream. They are a trickle-down effect. They are downriver of the will of the people being vocal and adamant about where justice is going in this country. And so you finally saw integration occur. You finally saw, little black kids can go to school with little white kids. You finally saw the courts get in the game. And then you finally saw the executive branch take the our Little Rock Nine, the Arkansas Nine, the 9 little black kids who went to high school there, and the governor hauled them off, and
With
the executive branch. The executive branch activated the National Guard to go back in and forcibly integrate that school with those 9 kids. Yeah. But that was all after so many weeks and months and years of Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and all the civil rights leaders saying, this is what needs to happen. And we are going to quietly do sit-ins and protests and marches until we are recognized. So yes, these institutions, I think, can and still will do what they need to do, but they're going to do it that much quicker once the writing's on the wall and we say enough is enough, we're not doing this anymore. So we know what we got to do, especially after you read that Kissinger quote. We know we're going to win because goodness prevails. All the question really that remains in my mind is how long is it going to take? Right. And we're the answer to that problem. So we just need to get in the game. And I think we are.
Yeah, thank you for that. And for those folks, hey, you know what? Around the world too, there are cracks in the global foundation for these tyrannical systems come in place. I'll name Canada. We already have, it just passed in the Supreme Court of British Columbia, which was taken forth against the Queen. Many of us suspect she's no longer alive, but still against the Queen, against Trudeau, and against Dr. Bonnie Henry, who is, like the Dr. Death of British Columbia, like Fauci is down in the States, right? That is mandating all this stuff. It was just heard, arguments were just heard last week, and judge is going to come back and render a decision on moving forward, but it went nationwide. There are over 11 million Canadians reportedly signed up to remove the government out of 38 million. So out of 38 million, roughly a population in the last census, Leigh, I don't know. Oh, you didn't hear this? 11 million have reportedly signed a petition to remove Trudeau. Now, out of 38 million population, I know it's less than the state of California. Let's just figure that over the age of 18 that are able to sign that, maybe there's 25 million. So almost half the country is, and they've had to go out and find this information, or go to these little rallies that happen from Vancouver to Calgary, all the way through up to Whitehorse in the Northwest Territories and the Yukon. Yeah. For gosh sakes, people have to seek this out. So they're seeking this information. Just yesterday, Macron, the evil leader in France, was removed. They've announced that the Pope, there will be no other Pope that's voted in. So great, we're getting that tyrannical Vatican structure for on the negative side removed, no longer going to be. And in addition to that, we have bank runs in China. Not to say that's good for the citizens that can't get the money out of the banks that they want, but you're seeing these structures crumble. I mean, Russia just came out and announced this morning that they are going to lead with their own blockchain technology and their own cryptocurrency, because all the EU nations have to buy their gas from Russia with rubles and gold. And then here in the States, from what Governor DeSantis is doing in Florida, to the pushback on Newsom in California, to the Secretary of State in Colorado that was caught red-handed fixing the presidential election and congressional elections in Colorado. And she has kind of went very, very quiet, puckered up over the last few weeks. These things are moving forward because that's coming to light, like Leigh is saying. So get involved.
They are.
Seek out these folks. Leigh, where can people find you? Is it on our America's Frontline Doctors website?
I sort of helped them launch their legal efforts in the very beginning. That was about a year ago now. And I still work hand in glove with Bobby Kennedy's group CHD. With all of us are playing nicely, which is the good news. We may not be locked up on every single thing, but in the main, we're all frightened of what's going on, committed to pushing back this crazy tide that's upon us. But right now, I have my own nonprofit, and I've rebranded it. It's called freedomfighternation.org. And I've called it that because I had this sort of aha moment where I realized, golly, what are we? We're a bunch of freedom fighters. And there's a nation of us. I mean, we go to these rallies, we go out on the street, we're standing in line at a grocery store, and I'll be gosh darned, everybody's a freedom fighter, even the quiet ones. And you're like, there's a lot more of us than we realize. So I wanted this to be a place for people of like mind to congregate. You can see, I'm going to be adding some stuff to the website now that I was traveling so much I couldn't get anything done for the whole year, but now I've got a couple of months here in summer where I'm going to get caught up. It goes through a lot of the initiatives that we've been behind, from the U.S. Convoy to the fight with the FAA to not have the pilots be vaccinated lest they fall out of the sky while we're, in a plane with them, to the congressional stuff with the military, the whistleblower stuff. And then most recently, the most recent one we had was getting DeSantis and Florida on board to push back against the Special Olympics, that after saying that all of these little disabled kids could participate without a COVID vaccine, changed their mind on the eve of the game. So I was actually the connection point between, we wrote a nasty letter to Special Olympics and said, what the hell are you playing at? You're supposed to protect these kids, not discriminate against them. That didn't get anywhere. Then I got all of these upset parents, media interviews with people like you, Brad, and all the way up to Tucker. That didn't do it. And finally I said, this is for the birds. I'm going to get Florida involved, because Florida was hosting the games, as luck would have it, this summer. And Florida, to its credit, tried to play very nicely with them for about a month and wasn't getting anywhere. So 2 days before the games, on Thursday, before the games came out in early June, they said, well, if the Special Olympics doesn't play ball and continues to violate law, we're going to fine them almost $28 million. And 2 hours later, the game said, we don't want that. Guess what? That big bat that you're carrying around worked, and we're going to actually follow the law. Right. So all of these types of initiatives that are not necessarily courtroom legal battles, so they don't get the kind of press, because they're sort of bully the bully moves, or behind the scenes kind of moves, or leverage kind of moves, or art of war kind of moves. Those are all sort of recounted on the website. There's a resources button. If you need resources, there's a donation button. We are actively involved in rebuilding a lot of these structures. So people like your significant other, Brad, your girlfriend, Amy, who wants to practice medicine to help heal people, not kill them, and so many other doctors and nurses that we know who also want to get back to their Hippocratic Oath and their business of actually caring for people and making their lives better. So we're rebuilding a healthcare world that is based on freedom. I'm actively involved with that movement. I'm also involved with a sort of a competitor to Amazon for patriots who give a darn. So we're not funding these leftist crazy companies who are using our money to turn around and assassinate us, essentially. So all of these types of things you can find again at freedomfighternation.org. There's a link there to get email blasts from me, although I don't drown you in them because I'm too busy to get them out most of the time. But when there's something really pressing, I do give you a word or a heads up. And you can also text the word freedom to 53445. Again, that's 53445 is the number you text, and you just type the word freedom in. And when we're doing a text blast like, hey, Convoy's going to leave, we need everybody to be here at a certain point if you want to support it, or whatever it might be, that's sort of real time, in the know, on the fly kind of updates. Again, not something I activate very often, but just when needed. So we are appreciative. And I say we, I really mean me and my cat, who is my current assistant. I'm a one-man band these days, but we still get a lot done. We're very appreciative of any time or other help that you can provide, and it's freedomfighternation.org.
Beautiful. Yep, we've had that set up here for a little bit. We'll put all the links in there, as well as the text address. I'm still on your text since the nationwide walkout was organized, so thank you all for that.
Yes.
When I would do it, we shared it with a lot of the hospital groups around the area, and then our own, personal. So thank you for that. Leigh, thank you so much. Truly amazing. Appreciate the time. Ladies and gentlemen, please like, subscribe, enable notifications. And as President John F. Kennedy said, that the service of truth is the ultimate form of heroism. So share this. Share Leigh's site, go there, get involved, share this with other people, put this out on social media. If you know whistleblowers, they can safely go and contact Leigh through freedomfighternation.org. You've seen the website, it's on the link, it's here. Get involved, and we can speed up the process. The more, the merrier, literally, and doing so in love and levity and liberty. I'm Brad Wozni. This is the Sovereign Soul podcast show. Thank you all. Appreciate that. And have yourself a wonderful rest of your day and evening ahead. If you like any of the memes or you have any to share with us, please put them in the comments, get a hold of us, let us know, vote on the most famous memes, and heck, definitely send a lot of love to this hero for humanity, Leigh Dundas, right now. Keep her in your prayers. Go contact her too and tell her how amazing she did. Thank you all. Good night. Thanks for joining us on the program, ladies and gentlemen. Please like, follow, subscribe, share this with 9 friends and family. And of course, if you enjoy our bling'd Buddha firing red pills from his 9mm, let us know.